Welcome, Loretta. How are you?
Fine, how are you?
Doing well. We're being live streamed to YouTube, but we haven't quite started yet. So we'll start in about 5 minutes.
Wonderful. I wanted to make sure I didn't have any difficulties because we had a Zoom update here today and it screwed up a few things, but it looks like we're good.
We're good. I'm glad.
And Loretta, I'm the moderator. Is there a specific way you want me to address you, like Mrs. Radford or Loretta?
Oh, either way is fine. Loretta is fine. Miss Radford is fine. Professor Radford is fine. However, I'm easy to please. I almost ate too much candy today for this event at 6 o'clock again.
You can send some of that candy this way. Oh.
The Valentine candy is in the stores.
Oh, yeah, it's dangerous. Dr. Galoob is on. Okay. Hello, Dr. Galoob. How are you?
Great. Glad to be here.
Yeah. All right. We are almost there. Oh, Allison's on. Very nice.
Stephen, how are you?
Great. Good to see you, Loretta. Or Professor Radford, I guess we worked through that. So yeah.
Yeah.
And last person is Sarah. Two minutes and Sarah is joining us. Just a moment.
Is Gray on the call?
Oh, where's Gray? Good catch. See here. All right, Sarah, and one last, Gray. Okay, well, it is 6 o'clock, so I'm going to go ahead and get started. We have one other panelist that will be joining us soon. So welcome everyone to our webinar this evening, a system that isn't just racial disparities in Oklahoma's criminal legal system. I'm Evita Fox-Crider with Oklahomans for Criminal Justice Reform, and we are excited to have you all tuning in with us this evening to engage in this very important discussion. This month is Black History Month, and we thought it would be fitting to hold this conversation at this time to foster dialogue around how our criminal legal system has historically impacted Oklahoma's communities of color, specifically the Black community, and what reforms are on the table to redress the harm that's been done and to build a better future for our entire Oklahoman community moving forward. Now, we have an impressive panel here with us this evening. We encourage you all to ask questions. You can post your questions into the chat, and toward the end of our discussion, we'll have our panel get to as many of the questions as time will allow. And before turning it over to our amazing moderator, Liliana, I'm going to introduce and thank our wonderful co-hosts who have helped put this event together, the League of Women Voters of Oklahoma, Norman Branch, and the Social Work Student Association of the University of Oklahoma. I'm going to ask Doris from the League to share a sentence or two as to why it was important for them to hold this discussion. Doris.
Hey, thanks, Evita. And thank you and good evening to everyone. And yeah, we, the League, were very happy to be invited to co-sponsor this event, especially as our group is currently doing a study on Oklahoma's criminal legal system. So let me say just a bit about the League of Women Voters. So we are a nonpartisan political organization that encourages active participation in government, and we approach public policy change through education and advocacy. So with that said, it is not news, I think, to anyone here tonight that there is racial and ethnic bias in our criminal legal system, not just in Oklahoma, but across the United States. Additionally, we have to note that there is also a specific bias against women as well, leaving Black and ethnic women as some of the most affected by the inequities of our current system. So what I'm hoping for tonight is a focus on aspects of this long-standing disparity in criminal justice that will lead us to ideas for advocacy and action to begin the process of bringing the Oklahoma criminal legal system to a better, if not a high level of equity for all of Oklahoma citizens. Thanks.
Thank you, Doris. Liliana, I'm going to turn it over to you to introduce yourself and to share on behalf of SWASA and to get us started.
Okay, thank you. So yeah, I'm a senior social work major at OU and a member of the Social Work Student Association. So this year for my internship, I've been working with TEAM and Oklahomans for Criminal Justice Reform, just kind of dipping my toes into criminal social work and ideally helping to promote more critical discussion of our state's legal system and the unique issues that we see. So again, just thank everyone for being here, and I'm just gonna jump right in and introduce our panelists. So first we have Professor Loretta Radford. She is the legal director for Oklahoma City School of Law's Criminal Justice Center, where she assists in teaching at the Student Bail Bond Clinic and develops ideas to challenge the criminal justice system. Prior to becoming the legal director, Professor Radford worked in the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Northern District of Oklahoma. And there she served in 3 divisions: the criminal division, where she prosecuted federal crimes; the civil division, where she defended the United States in actions filed against the government; the financial litigation unit, where she supervised the collection of debts owed to the United States. As a part of her legal career, she has had the honor of serving as the first assistant to the U.S. Attorney for the Northern District of Oklahoma, and later served as the acting United States Attorney for the Northern District during a presidential transition period. We also have Dr. Stephen Galoob, a Chapman Professor of Law at the University of Tulsa College of Law. His previous experience includes practicing law as a commercial litigator in Washington, D.C. He's also worked with TU Law and undergraduate students as a part of Project Commutation, which has helped secure commutations for hundreds of people. We also have Leroy Bryant. Leroy is a formerly incarcerated reform advocate who has firsthand experience of this issue. And Gray Peterson, a social work student who does community work with local organizations that prioritize advocacy like UNR, Indian Territory, and the Oklahoma Coalition for Revolutionary Action, as well as Oklahomans for Criminal Justice Reform. And then lastly, we have Sarah Edwards, the co-founder and interim executive director of Oklahomans for Criminal Justice Reform. Her background includes serving as the former Deputy General Counsel for Governor Henry and the former attorney for the Oklahoma House of Representatives, as well as an attorney and counsel with Hartzog Conger Kaysen. So I'm going to start with our prepared questions, and anyone's welcome to answer, but they are directed at specific panelists. So this first one is for Dr. Galoob, Professor Radford, and Sarah. The origin of law enforcement in America is founded on protecting white property owners. Is it possible to rectify a system with an inherently biased history? Is there a correlation between the origin of law enforcement and the racial disparities contained in the criminal legal system today?
Ms. Gordon, I'm happy to start that conversation. If you look at, see, this is where, and I talk to law students all the time about having a clear understanding of history and how this country was started in order to really understand the frailties of the criminal justice system. And one of the things that I start with is the slavery period post-Civil War. If you look at a lot of the historical readings about that time period, and just prior to the Emancipation Proclamation being signed, there was a necessary, there was a need to control, find, locate, and punish runaway slaves. And that's really the first established law enforcement, were individuals who were deputized in order to do that. Later, it developed into other kinds of law enforcement during the Jim Crow period and so forth and so on. But what has happened is all of these little transgressions have become embedded in the criminal justice system, and they still operate in a way which is unfair to people of color and even indigenous people in the area. And so what I see as the problem requires years and years of dismantling a system that was designed to basically protect white interests, and then developed into a system that adversely impacted people of color and indigenous people. And so that's where we find ourselves today in how do we fix this problem?
Go ahead, Professor. Yeah.
Yeah, oh, thanks, Sarah. I wanted to agree with Professor Radford about obviously the origins of our criminal legal system are rooted in, and many of our sort of laws that bind us today are rooted in a legal system that was designed to protect property interests, and the development of modern policing is actually relatively recent. It's within the 20th century really is the first development of what we would recognize as police forces in the sort of contemporary sense. I personally think that that history is informative, but it doesn't really place it places limits on what we can do, but it doesn't lock us into any particular kind of destiny. I do agree with Professor Radford, though, that the kind of things that we would need to do to make our system more equitable and more just, and to eliminate the kinds of racial disparities that we see both in the Oklahoma criminal legal system and the criminal legal system all across the United States, would require something equivalent to dismantling. But the thing that has been made much more salient to me in the last few years is that it's not just the criminal legal system that we would have to dismantle. There are a number of other governmental systems that feed into and interact with the criminal legal system, and that help generate some of the disparities that we see in our system. And so the dismantling, in order to dismantle the frankly, racially or the racist outcomes from the criminal legal system, we would really need to address a lot more than that. Criminal legal system is part of it, but certainly by no means the entire part of it. We've seen in the last 2 years, the public health system, the education system, the social welfare system, the firefighting system, the way that we treat people, and in all aspects of their interaction with the government. It has this tendency to produce and to reinforce these outcomes.
Okay. And if I might add to what Dr. Galub is saying, it is a bigger problem than just taking a look at the police department and seeing how we can fix it, so to speak, because the history of criminal justice in America encompasses a whole bunch of sociological factors that developed us into the legacy of policing that we have right now. And quite frankly, there's a common pattern as it relates to predominantly African-American neighborhoods or even neighborhoods of color, where they are simultaneously over-policed when it comes to surveillance and social issues within the community, and they are under-policed when it comes to even just basic access to emergency services. I think those are the kinds of issues that Dr. Galub may be alluding to, is that we need all of these areas that have become segregated from predominantly Black neighborhoods because of the legacy of policing and how it has developed over time.
And I would just like to add, on top of all of that, I think that that's absolutely true. But the way I see it is one issue, huge issue, is leadership. And leadership is changed, through voting, through the electoral process. And it's a matter of, we need to get everyone registered to vote, and everyone, understanding and acknowledging that their vote does count. That, it's not okay to be complacent. That's how we make change. And you see it with, I think, Professor Radford, what you're saying I see with district attorney's offices, you get essentially a mentality and leadership that says, you know what, we're going to be hard on crime, and we're the good guys, and we are going to punish the bad guys. And we're not only going to punish them, if you make a mistake, we're going to punish you to the extreme extent of the law in Oklahoma is what we see. And that has to change. It's a culture change, but I see the culture changing with the change in leadership, and leadership change comes from grassroots and from people saying, you know what, I can make a difference, and I'm going to make a difference, and I'm voting this way.
Thank you guys so much. I'm going to move on to the next question. And that is, do we see BIPOC, so Black, Indigenous, people of color communities targeted by the justice system, or if so, how? And then that is for Leroy, Dr. Galub, Professor Radford, and Gray.
Well, as far as I'm concerned, yes, and it's just something that the system accepted as far as the way it's going to be, and they're not holding one another accountable. When they see things, it's plain as as day. It's just like, for instance, that woman when she killed that Black man in Tulsa, the police officer, and she got away with it, I believe. I mean, it's cold-blooded murder, and no one says nothing. I mean, they do, but then they don't do nothing. That is part of the problem, I think, when it comes to policing and justice in America, and for us, people of color. Sometimes we just get a bad deal, and everybody just say, or don't say, and it just happen, and just let it go. And they don't follow through on what, just like we talking tonight, on what we are planning or what we want to decide or think it needs to be changed. We just we're gonna change things, we gotta change things, everybody gotta be in agreement. And I know we all ain't gonna be in agreement and see things the same way, because we all human and we all can be at fault. But we can find a solution if we work together and look forward and doing what is right. We know it's right. That's something we just
If I might comment, Ms. Gordon, if you go, this is how I feel on this issue. It's my opinion. If you go to the opening page of the NAACP website, there's a quote in there by the president and the chief executive officer. And basically, it says the relationship between law enforcement and our communities is fractured because of decades of a bad system that has let countless issues go unaddressed. Essentially, what has happened in the criminal justice system is that we have become heavily impacted by police bias and by judicial precedents that really don't work for the modern way in which we live today. I'm one of those now. Dr. Gallup, I think, is the constitutional expert in the room, but I'm one of those that believes that the Constitution is that the Constitution is a flexible document. That it's supposed to change as our society grows and changes, and that's what the framers intended when they put it together. But we haven't done that. We've allowed the same judicial precedents to govern the conduct of individuals, both police officers and citizens, over a very lengthy time. And what happens is the results from that are long lasting. So, and when that happens, it's those outdated judicial precedents that lead to the targeting of Black neighborhoods, because these microaggressions, that the biases within these law enforcement units that they take with them and they give to the people that they train. Let's go back to the George Floyd incident, where 3 other police officers, I believe 2 of them in training, sat and watched a police officer kill a man. Nobody said a word. That is because of the historical culture of police officers. These individuals knew that they were going to have to get back on the beat with the same man who was using excessive force against George Floyd. That's my opinion. That's why they didn't speak up, right? To stop the incident. And so when we become as a society held hostage by old laws, old cultures, and old ways of doing things, this is the result that you get: a criminal justice system that targets certain neighborhoods based upon beliefs that these neighborhoods need more aggressive attention than other neighborhoods. So those neighborhoods don't get services, right? Those neighborhoods get policed. And that's a different concept in our culture today. It does, in fact, go back to what Ms. Edwards was talking about in her responses earlier, that we've got to change the leadership. If we are unable to change the thought processes and the culture in the criminal justice system, not just from judges, but from every aspect, from arrest to trial, we are going to continue to see this trend in targeted communities. We're going to continue to see this trend in problems with law enforcement. And unless we can put a stop to it now, and when I say this, I don't mean to be callous, but there's many of us who've been talking about what's fair in the criminal justice system for years and years, but we're just now getting attention. As they say in the social media groups, criminal justice reform is now trending. And I say we need to ride that wave until it comes down, because this is our opportunity to change the mindsets of those who hold us hostage to an old way of thinking.
May I add something very briefly? I'm no expert on the Constitution, but I know enough to get by. I would like to add that we all know about New York Police Department stop and frisk policies that was ruled as unconstitutional in 2013. That is one example of a policy that existed and can be acted out whether it is written in law, de facto versus de jure. We have words to name things, name how people act out policies, act out against different communities and respond to people differently. We've had the verbiage for that since we've had the verbiage to be able to communicate and have conversations with each other. So to phrase the question as if, oh, is this happening? It's like, not only is it happening, it's been happening for at least a decade. We've already decided that it was unconstitutional. We already decided that it was unacceptable. We've already decided that there was something that we could do and should be doing to address our policies and the ways that in which we go about police departments, the ways in which we go about interacting with Black and Brown communities, especially Indigenous communities. So that's been the information for a while. That's been the facts for a while. We've known the facts for a while. It's just, are we going to do anything with the facts?
Right.
Thank you so much. That provides a good segue to the next question, which is for Professor Radford, Sarah, anybody. Oklahoma has the highest rate of deadly police shootings in the country, and what should be done about it to provide greater police accountability to reduce the rate of violence as a response by law enforcement?
You want me to jump in on that? Because I definitely have an opinion on that.
Sure.
I think they need to remove qualified immunity as a defense to law enforcement. And the same way in which we judicially created it is the same way in which we can judicially take it away. Many citizens believe that that is statutory in nature, and they blame Congress or they blame state statutes or whatever. It's a judicial creation, a judicial theory, and we can remove it. So I ask my students in the bail bond clinic all the time, so why don't we just get rid of qualified immunity for law enforcement officers? There's a point at which it becomes relevant in the class assignment. And they're all resistant to it, right? In removing qualified immunity, and they all give reasons why the police need qualified immunity. And they all want to protect law enforcement. I do too. But at the end of the day, I also want to protect citizens. It's kind of like one congressman said a few years ago, I want police officers to go home to their families at the end of the day, and I want citizens to go home to their families at the end of the day, even when there's been a confrontational stop between law enforcement and a police officer. Qualified immunity keeps law enforcement from having to really train, think about, and decide how they're going to manage confrontations with citizens, right? And so if we remove that, so I always ask the students, so if we remove qualified immunity, what would they do? I said, well, they can do the same thing I do. They can buy professional malpractice insurance, right? However that would work out. But that's what we as lawyers have to do, right? We don't get immunity because we make a bad decision for a client. Most professionals don't. Doctors don't, right? And so, but people are very resistant to removing that. But I think that's one of the ways in which you can stop the deadly police shootings. Another way, a lot of people complain about this. I'm a fan of community policing. And the reason that I'm a fan of community policing, now, when I say community policing, I mean, it's got to be more than just playing basketball with the kids on the school grounds, right? I'm talking about a police officer who actually has a beat that he controls, where he knows grandmother, he knows father, he knows the children from that family, and so forth and so on. Because when we really institute and enforce community policing, this is what I believe. I believe it's difficult to shoot someone you know. And I believe it's hard for a citizen to shoot a law enforcement officer when they know them well. And it's hard for a police officer to shoot an individual when they know them well, and they will look for other alternatives. See, the problem, these deadly police shootings have a very real problem that is bearing itself out in the studies. Because police officers are so poorly trained on how to manage their aggressions, on how to de-escalate a situation, The study shows that when an officer has to make a decision, a life or death decision between shooting, particularly when they have confrontations with African Americans, they choose to shoot rather than talk about de-escalating the confrontation. And so it's that choice to shoot that we have got to target training on law enforcement. Those are the two ways that I see in which we can slow down the progression of these deadly shootings.
Professor, I agree with you on that. And one thing I just would like to add is, perhaps we need, some more diversity, and we need recruitment of, diversity in these positions. And additionally, training, of course. I think in a fear-based society, which is what we have become, especially, and the fear that comes with the position, it seems to me that diversity, training, and a certain level of counseling in these positions is mandatory.
I agree with you entirely, and if I might add another comment, fear is a problem too that has to be generated in the training, because we have to be very real about this discussion and understanding what law enforcement faces every day, okay? And I don't want to turn this into a Second Amendment discussion, but I feel compelled to say this. It's a lot of guns out there. Any law enforcement officer who makes a stop should naturally assume that that individual in the car has got a gun somewhere. I picked juries for a long time in Oklahoma, in federal court and in state court. And every time you ask somebody who's a gun owner, the whole room stands up. Okay. And it doesn't necessarily mean that everybody who carries a gun is a bad guy. That's not what I'm suggesting. But what I am suggesting is that everybody who has a gun doesn't always make those instinctive decisions about how to use that gun. And so I do believe that law enforcement officers face a threat every time they make a stop with a citizen. But it's the training to go beyond the fear, to de-escalate situations, to remove that element of shoot first and ask questions later that has to stop.
So you touched on this a little bit already, Professor Radford, but this next question is geared towards you. What issues are you seeing in your law clinic as it relates to race in our carceral system, and what are your law students doing about that?
Well, let me put it this way: the bail bond clinic that I supervise, those students actually assist with arraignment proceedings in state court through the Oklahoma County Public Defender's Office. In the class portion, we talk about everything. However, we discuss all of a defendant's constitutional rights from the point of arrest to the point of trial, okay? And so their primary goal is to determine whether or not the judge has appropriately set a bond for an individual working through the public defender's office based upon their criminal history and other factors. And so that's kind of the focus we take in the bail bond clinic. The flip side of that is really the biggest issue that my students are seeing as they help with different problems, different issues that come up at the public defender's office or even at the diversion hub here in Oklahoma County, are these outrageous, excessive fines and costs that are being assessed against defendants. And many of those defendants wind up making multiple trips through the criminal justice system on failure to appear warrants because they can't pay those excessive fines and costs. When you take the average fine on a misdemeanor starts out at what, $500? By the time the courts finish assessing a defendant with all of these charges, most of them totally unrelated to the crime, a $500 crime can become easily $2,000, $2,500, $3,000. And the courts are not being lenient in what they can do to eliminate those burdens on defendants. So basically, we are funding the criminal justice system through the backs of criminal defendants. And that means they are actually paying people to prosecute them. So in the mix of all of this, all of these judicial precedents that we have set, the presumption of innocence, pretrial detention should be liberally granted, all of these policies and rules become for naught because those individuals can't pay the fines and they just create a legacy of debt. And that's the biggest issue we confront that comes into discussion with the students many times, because the courts have a mechanism for reducing those fines and costs. Now, I believe the Oklahoma Policy Institute here in Oklahoma City did a zip code study showing that those failure to appear warrants on fines and costs, they definitely linked them to. There were more fines, there were more failure to appears issued in what is geographically considered substantial African-American communities in Oklahoma City, which is Northeast Oklahoma City. And that zip code study showed that people of color communities were in fact being targeted by these unfair practices. Indirectly, but nonetheless targeted.
Thank you. That is incredibly significant to talk about the financial aspect of all of this. For Sarah Edwards, talk to us about the issues we're seeing regarding women being incarcerated, particularly women of color in this state.
For sure. You know, as the professors have alluded to or right out stated, I mean, it's a full-on issue with education, healthcare, you know, prison, child welfare. All of those are so very interrelated. But when I was in Governor Henry's office and I saw files up for pardons, paroles, commutations, and I did deep dives into all of these files. And this was at a time when nonviolent offenses had to go through the governor as well as the violent offenses. But you see women who have sustained significant trauma and abuse and are essentially self-medicating for this trauma without resources on their own. You know, I mean, one example I think that I'll never forget was a 5 or 6 year old girl. Her stepfather was prostituting her out to his friends. And she was raising, by the age of 14, she was raising her siblings while continuing to prostitute. And she actually did not develop substance abuse issues until around age 20 or 21, and then incarcerated for decades for these substance abuse issues. So what we've been doing is essentially punishing and incarcerating victims of violence, victims of horrible things I can't, you know, that you can't even imagine. And that's a huge issue. In Oklahoma, the state in particular, we are one of the highest, we've been one of the highest for 3 decades of incarcerating women. And it's generally for substance abuse and property crimes to feed substance abuse or, you know, to take care of children. 80% of women who are incarcerated have children. And it's, you know, you look at the massive, not only multi-generational effect, but the massive just economic effect of it. You know, women with this trauma trying to work and support children, and then you know, additionally working through substance abuse issues. It's a matter of, you know, we need to go in and help support. We have programs like Remerge and Women in Recovery who have an 80% effective rate with wraparound services to help, you know, provide counseling to help in the trauma, to help the children, to help in that cycle. All of that. I mean, that's huge. We need to look at the full story, not just look at, you know what, this woman was shoplifting, or this woman, you know, sold crack, or I'll never forget, I had a file come across my desk, and this woman had 3 crack offenses, life without parole for 3 crack offenses. Not right. It's not right.
Thank you so much. This next question is for Professor Radford, Leroy, Gray, and Dr. Galoob. So what is the larger impact of disenfranchising communities of color due to felony convictions in Oklahoma?
I'm happy to start the conversation here because I've tried a couple of times to get grants on this issue and I haven't been successful at doing it yet. But restoring the right to vote is probably one of the most important things that we can do for individuals who've been convicted of felonies. But when you've been convicted of a felony, you lose very important community and citizen rights. In the state of Oklahoma, I speak of it broadly as across the United States as a whole. All states vary in terms of what they can do, but even in terms of just something as simple and necessary as being reintegrated into the community by finding a job. Oklahoma, I believe, is currently under an executive order in state agencies that they cannot look into the criminal history of an individual on employment applications, so that person doesn't have to disclose whether or not they've ever been convicted of a felony. But many private companies, they still ask that question. And the way in which they ask the question, you even have to answer the question if you have received a deferred sentence, which as lawyers we know doesn't technically result in a conviction. You lose voting rights, you lose traveling abroad. And for a long time, the voting rights statute in Oklahoma was so dadgum confusing that many, and the perception is still out there, there's so much education needed in the area of how you can restore and when you can restore your right to vote. Because there's lots of people who still think that they can't vote if they get a felony conviction, they can never vote again in their life. And that is not true. But there's never been an educational platform to teach people how to get their voting rights restored, okay? There's never been a platform to teach people about all of the problems that come with a felony conviction. When I worked for the Department of Justice, I ran the second chance programs under the Obama administration. And one of the primary goals was to assist individuals reintegrating into the communities. Okay, and I'm going to hit upon how it impacts women. Okay, teaching people how to reintegrate into the communities by getting some of the basics of life: food, shelter, clothing, a job, a place to live, those kinds of things, reuniting them with their families. And talk about the difficulty in doing that and trying to change the culture and help people understand that when we successfully reintegrate individuals who've been convicted of a felony back into the community, that is public safety, because we protect them from committing new crimes, right? But we have to change the culture and the way people think about that. But one of the things that I used to do in the second chance program was try to teach people how to stay out of jail. Right? And one of the more simpler things was once you've been convicted of a felony under federal law, you can no longer possess a gun, a firearm. There is no exception for being a hunter, for self-protection, for none of that. You just cannot, the fact that you have a gun and you've been convicted of a felony is a crime. Guess who starts to cry every time I would have that discussion about what the federal statutes? Women. Because many of these women who come out of incarceration, they go live in communities that are already marginalized by violence and aggression. They need a gun for protection and they can't have one, right? Now, and so all of these things do nothing but serve to continue that cycle of individuals going back, being convicted of one felony, picking up another felony, and the process continues over time. So eventually you have an entire segment of your population that is disenfranchised from participating in our government. Can't serve on juries. You can't travel abroad. You can't find a job. You're not eligible, depending on the conviction, you're not eligible to be a teacher. You can't be a childcare professional. There are some jobs that require professional licensing that you'll never be able to have. I don't care how much education you get, because you have a felony conviction. And so we've got to look at how to remove those stigmas so that we can successfully reintegrate people back into the community. And quite frankly, when I was in the federal government, I used to end that seminar by saying, I am anxious for you to become a taxpayer, right? And that's what we're trying to do, reintegrate individuals back into society.
Thank you. Dr. Gloop, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I mean, I think one thing that we might add is, like many aspects of the criminal legal system, there's a way in which you can try to get out and it kind of sucks you back in. And one of the things that Professor Radford said earlier about the fines and fees that are part of our criminal legal system, that are really a kind of ensnaring part of our criminal legal system, also can prevent people from voting. And we've seen this in many states. In Oklahoma, I think it's somewhat unclear, but you have to completely discharge your sentence, and some states that means you have to pay off your fines and fees before you can vote. This is a way that different aspects of the system, felon disenfranchisement and the legal financial obligations, can kind of interact with each other. And it makes reform kind of difficult because there are so many, the system is so complicated that attempting to reform one part of it is sometimes ineffective because other parts of the system can blunt any reform efforts aimed at one specific area.
Well, I think the wheel of justice turns slow, especially when it comes to Black, and people failing to realize how important it is to stand up and make a difference when they see something is wrong and they don't. It's just like, but my case, like I did 24 years for crack, life without, and some bills came up that could have made a difference in that sentence when everybody knows that it was what's wrong. And nobody say nothing. They just say, okay, at least they tried. Did they? They talking about it. But that's what's wrong. That's the problem. They steady talking, and when they see it's a serious issue like that or many others, something needs to get done sooner. And it would help a lot. To show people that know they really care and they're concerned about things more, really taking it serious, not just talking about it.
If I may say something really quickly, Leroy, I think that's very true. I just want to agree with you. And I also think that willful ignorance is something that we need to talk about, especially as it relates to the policies that we create and how those affect laws, how those affect stigmas in which we respond to people who are previously incarcerated, how those affect the ways that we treat Black and brown people, how that affects literally everyone. So I heard a lot of conversation about voting rights, and citizens should be able to vote. Citizens are allowed to vote. So if a person who has been incarcerated is still a citizen, if you keep them from being able to travel to another country, that means they do not get citizenship at another country. That means they stay here, they get stuck in this system that literally pulls them back in. That's a shame. That's a shame, and it's unnecessary with the amount of information that we have, with the amount of educated individuals that we have who have been working in the criminal justice system for how long they have been, with the things that we have been witnessing, with the impacts that it is having on Black, Indigenous, and brown communities all across the United States of America. It is absolutely ridiculous. It is willful ignorance, and it is not excusable. So there are starting points. Everything is a system. Everything is a web. It will pull at every little part of the judicial system, but it is not impossible. It just requires intentional effort and a willingness to be able to push past the fear that people feel about uncertainty. so that we can actively involve every single member of our community, which includes formerly incarcerated people and not incarcerated people, and it extends to every single citizen who lives in the United States of America.
Great. I just want to say, I mean, wholeheartedly, I think that's exactly right. And I also want to say, I mean, if you look at it, it all seems so overwhelming, right? I mean, there's so much that needs to be done, and especially in Oklahoma, but it is possible. It's a matter of people working together and working with each other and not against each other. Groups that are in this circle and in this realm working with each other. We can if we can go to the moon, we can tackle this, right?
Great. Speaking of willful ignorance, this next question, how do you see the impact of racial disparities and the carceral system within our educational spaces?
So I think that stories are impactful, and I am going to share my own personal story. I was a student an active student at the University of Oklahoma in the social work program, in progress of getting my bachelor's in social work. And I was overwhelmed by the amount of racial disparity and the ways in which we treated Black and Brown people, specifically Indigenous people, under systems that were advertised as being there to support families and children, especially in communities of color. And I decided to take a break from school. That's how bad it was. I was 1 year from getting my degree. I could not cope with it. And I literally had a full-blown, I can't do this anymore. So when I tell you that the impact of racial disparities in the impact of racial disparities in the carceral system exists in the educational spaces, I'm telling you, and I'm speaking from my own personal experience. I believe that the traditional schooling system that we know and understand in the United States is antiquated. The best available research and knowledge that is 17 years behind usually what they teach in classes is not up to date to account for the amount of information that we have access to, and to make learning educational spaces reflect what we need in our country and in our policies and in our laws. It literally just reflects the carceral system. It reflects colonialistic ideals that do not benefit everyone, including their diversity in experience and in background, diversity in perspectives. And, you know, just historically, if we're looking at we've got 32 tribes in Oklahoma. If you're looking at the history of how you wanted to shape someone's brain and change their brain, and change their entire way in which they are able to interact in this system that exists in Oklahoma, they had residential schools that literally would teach them how to assimilate into colonialist culture in Oklahoma and in the United States. That was unnecessary. It was harmful. It killed people. It's still here today. It is active in the ways in which we teach classes, the lack of information that we give students and young people about how to prepare for the world. I have been living on my own since I was 18 or 19 years old. And that has been an extreme struggle. I cannot even imagine what the experience would be for a formerly incarcerated person, or even to say an unhoused person, or someone who could fall victim to this system. So when I truly tell you, it's not giving what it needs to in our educational spaces. It really is not. It really is not. And there's a lot to improve, to be heard, there's a lot to change, and there's a lot.
Thank you.
I would add too that there is a definable, the study showed there's a definable pipeline from schools to prisons. Oklahoma spends more money on prisons I think the last budgetary item, the Department of Corrections, was a third line item in the governor's budget. It's still either second or third line item. We spend more money on incarcerating people than we do on educating individuals and preparing them for the world. That too, Ms. Peterson, is shameful. There's also currently a bill pending, and I don't have the bill number with me, but there's a bill pending to use risk analysis against juveniles who are arrested. Now, who do you think that's going to impact? It will definitely impact people of color. And for those of you who may or may not be familiar with it, I'm very anti-risk assessment, even though we use them a lot in the federal system because they use them to determine whether or not you're eligible for probation. But risk analysis looks at demographics and characteristic traits in your background to predict the future, to determine whether you are going to be a recidivist or you're going to be rehabilitatable. And those risk assessments are full of assumptions and generalities that lead to false positives and false negatives. They're just unpredictable. And so we have a bill pending in the state of Oklahoma legislature right now. How that bill got out of committee, I don't know. Because anybody who knows about how unreliable these risk assessment tools are would definitely not use it against juveniles, because what you're telling those juveniles is we're going to see whether or not we need to keep building bigger prisons.
Okay, thank you. This one is for Dr. Galoob and Ms. Edwards. So what role does bail play in exacerbating racial disparities in our criminal legal system? And what changes do we need to make to the bail system to rectify this?
Mr. Galoob, would you like to tackle this, or would you like me to go first?
Yeah, you can go first. It's fine.
Well, I think, I mean, bail is a huge issue, right? The cash bail system, you have violent offenders or people who are a safety threat who can get out because they can pony up for bail, getting out, and you have people, impoverished who can't afford bail, who are sitting for months and sometimes a year plus at a time, sitting in jail waiting adjudication. None of that's right. That's an issue that absolutely has to be tackled. And Professor Galoob, I'd be curious as to your thoughts on the constitutionality of people who are waiting adjudication, who've been charged but not sitting in jail, confined, not able to get out. What's your thought?
Yeah, I mean, I think constitutionally that is I guess it's okay, but that's a difficult argument to make constitutionally that that the system that we have violates the excessive bail clause. But I think that is an indication that as Professor Radford was saying, our jurisprudence on this is really impoverished. It's not an accident that a lot of poor people are in jail because they can't afford bail. This is actually kind of the way that it's designed. The threat of, especially for low-level offenses, the threat of jailing somebody pre-trial is really valued by prosecutors as a way of inducing plea bargaining. And although we tend to think of our criminal legal system as involving trials, as Professor Radford was saying earlier, nationally, upwards of 95%, and I would estimate in Oklahoma, although nobody really has stats on this, I think it's probably 99% of cases are resolved via plea bargain. And as a prosecutor, you have a lot more leverage on somebody if they're facing a year in jail and or a year or two in prison potentially for an offense, but they would have to wait in jail 6 months because they can't afford bail before they could even, get their case resolved, you have a lot more leverage to induce a plea bargain and reduce your caseload. So I think one of the broader problems here, which is a problem, with a lot of different aspects of our system, is that different entities are paying for different are paying for different things. And whenever you have different payers, what you have, people who are paying who are different than people who are making decisions about what should happen, you have a prospect that you can incur social costs that we would all rather not pay, but the logic of each individual bureaucracy supports the creation of those costs. So we don't really measure the social costs of keeping people incarcerated pre-trial, but we do. But one of the things we do know is that district attorneys or counties who do pay for district attorneys, or counties pay for jails. District attorneys are compensated out of court funds, and the state pays for prisons, right? But district attorneys determine who's going to jail and who's going to prison. And so the entities that are footing the bill for jails and prisons are not the ones who are deciding who goes there. And I think across the country, this financing disparity that the decision makers about who is incarcerated and how much to pay for incarceration are different than the decision makers about who's paying for these things. This is a problem that is a structural problem. It doesn't really, it exacerbates racial inequalities, but it's not itself the product of a racial inequality. And yet it really inhibits the possibility of reforming things. And it's something that, unless we can really when Professor Radford was talking about the kind of reformation that we need to have, the kind of restructuring that we need to have, this is one of the primary things that we need to restructure. District attorneys are elected on a countywide basis, but Tulsa County and Oklahoma County are much wider than the city of Tulsa and the city of Oklahoma City. And I think these kinds of structural features, how we pay for things, how we elect district attorneys, has an effect of contributing to the racial disparities that themselves, I think, are unconstitutional, but aren't are illegitimate and immoral. But I think that's precisely the problem, that they're not really unconstitutional.
Thank you guys so much. This next one is for Leroy, Dr. Gloob, and Professor Radford. How are the families of justice-involved individuals, specifically families of color, affected by incarceration? And is there a generational effect?
I would say, of course, there's a generational effect. I can't tell you how many times when I was doing public defender work that I represented members of the same family time and time again. Because if one individual is trapped in the system, pretty much the entire family is trapped in the system. I didn't find that to be true. When, public defender work is very unusual in the sense that you're a lawyer and a sociologist. You do a lot of lawyering, but you have quite a bit of sociology that comes along with that job as well, which is why some people are good at it and some people are not. Particularly when you're trying capital cases and you're looking for those second stage presentation for a representation for a defendant. So, but the problem is it becomes people do not see a way out because none of the systems in the criminal justice reform movement or in the system as it stands right now are helping them see a way out or be reintegrated back into the community. I saw the generational impact more on African-American males than any other segment. And I didn't statistically document this. I'm based upon my interactions with my clients and their families. Women typically can get out of it because they marry out of it, right? There's plenty of good guys, quote unquote, good guys, who are looking for someone to be their wife, the mother of their children, she's pretty, she's smart, she's whatever. But there's not a lot of girls looking for the bad boys, right? So they tend to stay trapped in that whole generational context. Here's the problem with it. Incarceration begins in our county jails. When you start talking about pretrial detention issues, we're talking about mass incarceration at the front end of the system, right? And so you can guarantee three things happening if you get charged with a crime. And this is why bail reform, the kind of reform that Dr. Galoob and Ms. Edwards have already talked about. If you're charged with a crime, if you're poor in America and you're charged with a crime and you have a job, chances are you're going to lose that job before you can get bail resolved. If you have a family and you're separated from your family because of the charge, chances are your family's not going to have the means to maintain constant contact with you, either through these expensive internet telephone calls or transportation for jail visits. And somebody else is going to have to care for whatever needs you might have. And then finally, as Dr. Galoob addressed, if you stay in jail long enough and you're innocent, you will consider a plea agreement just to go home, right? Because the confinement in a local jail is much, much worse than confinement in a institutionalized state Department of Corrections facility. And so when you start looking at all of those things and how they impact our communities of color, the cycle just continues. It's a generational cycle that just continues time and time again until somebody somewhere breaks the cycle and decides, I'm not going to do this again. And that's what we're faced with as lawyers who are trying to impact the criminal justice system. We're not just faced with changing laws, we're faced with changing culture. And that's sociological, demographic, cultural issues are the more difficult side. I can set up all kinds of arguments about why we need to eliminate cash bail. Kaylee Broader is one example. Poor young kid, 16 years old, who spends 3 years in Rikers Island, one of the worst prisons facilities in New York, and on a misdemeanor. His parents couldn't even round up enough money to make what I think the total bond was $2,000 or $3,000. He was that poor. Ultimately, he commits suicide. Kaylee Broader is an example of why cash bail is a problem, because poor people can't get out and rich people never get, they get past booking and they're out, right? They might get booked in, but they're never going to a jail cell because somebody's already on their way to get them. So until we can address all of these cultural issues, I think we're going to continue to see the generational impact on communities of color.
Professor, there's no question. I just like to add, if you're a mom and you are in jail and you have a plea deal, no matter what it was, and you just want to get home to your children,
exactly,
you're going to take that plea deal to get out. That's
exactly.
right.
Some of the more excessive things that I see in sentencing and in bond setting, that is just plain old disruptive to the family unit, right? Some of these excessive sentences, I think you've already talked about them. But you know what? I talk to a lot of young lawyers who are out there trying cases, and they tell me all the time about the facts in some of their criminal cases, and the prosecutors offered them a plea bargain, a 10-year deferred. Hell, I can't be good for 10 years.
That's exactly right. I mean, I'm sorry. Last time I checked, I wasn't God, you know?
Right. And so
I am not without faults.
Right.
That's
So
exactly
some of these just perpetuate an already faulty system.
I mean, that's absolutely right. But then in addition, Oklahoma, we have a general enhancement law that if you've messed up before, you can get up to life in prison for a nonviolent offense. And that's what enhancements are used for. They're for nonviolent offenses because our violent offenses already provide for significant penalties.
Absolutely.
So prosecutors use that general enhancement to extend sentences up to life in prison for nonviolent offenses, property, drug offenses. Yeah,
right. But I'm gonna say this because I don't want to be punitive to the prosecutors, because I don't want to piss off the prosecutors, because I'm here to tell you,
I get it. I'm already on the
prosecutors
target
are
list.
the most important factor in criminal justice reform.
Yes.
And if you can get one of them on board with why
Yes.
we need to change the system, we can make some impactful changes in criminal justice reform. They hold the charging decisions, they
Yes.
hold the bond setting decisions. Most of the time, their thought processes are aligned with the judge. If the prosecutor says, oh, judge, just let him out on a PR, the person's going to get out on a PR. There are so many things that the prosecutor holds in their hands. But
Yes.
But this is one of the ways in which the criminal justice system has to look at a different way to get our district attorneys. I think Dr. Gaylou hit upon this before. So the political system doesn't really work for choosing who's going to be our leader, right? Because prosecutors get to make the district. When I say prosecutors, I mean the district attorney. He gets to make his decisions in a closed room with nobody watching.
Exactly.
The
Yes.
average citizen doesn't even know how we got here. The
That's
average
right.
citizen doesn't know how the criminal justice system is supposed to work, right?
Yes.
It's the same way in the federal system. Ideally, what happens in the federal system is your senator recommends someone to be attorney general. That attorney general then makes decisions along with the president and Senate confirmation, who's going to be the U.S. attorney, who's going to in this district, in this district, in this district.
Yeah.
The average citizen who will be the subject of a felony indictment in federal court has no impact at all in deciding who the leadership is going to be. And in fact, many of them wouldn't even know, depending upon what party was in office, they wouldn't even know who to call, whether to call your senator, your majority senator, to impact him. The senators never tell people who's up for nomination. Just one day you wake up in the morning and you read in the newspaper that so-and-so has been nominated as the U.S. attorney for the U.S. attorney's office in Tulsa. So the process and the decision-making is always hidden from the public.
Yes.
So the public can't interfere with those processes.
Right. And that's not right. We need transparency in that aspect. But additionally, people don't focus on district attorney races. They don't, I don't think the general population actually understands how much power the district attorneys wield. And additionally, you know, and as you say, it goes both ways, right? I mean, we have prosecutors who they want to do the right thing. Like they are trying to help, and it's not an easy position. To be honest, I wouldn't want the position, right? It's not easy. It's tough, but we need to pay more attention. We need to make informed decisions. We need to understand, you know, are we going to be hard on crime? Are we going to be, you know, responsible on crime and realistic on crime and help people build back up, as you say, become taxpayers, become, you know, on their feet. Yeah.
Right.
Thank you guys both. You provided a great segue to the next question, which is directed at everybody. But if we could keep the responses to about 1 minute each, we're running a little low on time. So this question is, how did we get here? Oklahoma has the highest incarceration rate for African Americans per capita of any state in the nation. District attorneys or prosecutors ultimately decide what charges to file and the terms of punishment or consequences for a person charged with and convicted of a crime. Currently, there are no elected district attorneys who are people of color in Oklahoma. Is this lack of diversity a contributing factor in the disparities contained with the legal system? Are proximity, life experience, relatability, and understanding important factors for those tasked with determining the fate of another person?
Gray, I'd like to hear your thoughts on that one.
Um, if you ask why long enough, sooner or later, you're going to get to the root of the issue. It's kind of interesting because just based on what I have been able to observe throughout my experience in OU's social work program and being an intern, my practicum setting was at DHS and working in child welfare. I got the opportunity to witness a couple of criminal cases. I got to be there, be present in the courtroom and see how that works. And, I'm just saying, if we are still having judges explain to full-grown adults with English as their second language, how to read, who literally understand already how to read, and this is normal behavior, then that gives you a pretty clear picture of how a lot of things work in this judicial system. And that's just one example. I have plenty of examples, and I could be here for a long time. But pretty much what I'm saying is that issues like this snowball. If the Constitution of the United States of America was written by people who own slaves, who literally have cops who are literally descendants of the slave patrol, and they were in charge of making all of the rules because they were white landowners, why would we be surprised that African American people, Black people, brown people, indigenous people, victims of this system that can totally change, are victims of the system? It is not a surprise to me. It is simple. There are not many things in this life that are simple, but that is simple. There is so much information. There is so much wisdom here on this panel. There are so many people out in the entire United States of America who have been looking at the entire judicial system and able to address this. So if you make a cop Black, there's still a cop. If you make a lawyer Black, there's still a lawyer. If they're in a position of power and they're not wielding their power properly to be able to meet people where they're at and take into account their humanity, it doesn't matter what race they are. It doesn't matter what their gender identity is. It doesn't matter what their sexual orientation is. Anyone can be unempathetic to the experience of another human being. So if we have unempathetic people who are more focused on the subjugation of people and creating policies that reflect that power, of course we're going to have this system. It makes perfect sense.
Right. I agree with Ms. Peterson in her entire conversation. It's really not about, yes, we need to diversify the criminal justice system. I talk about that all the time, not just from the very beginning, from law enforcement to judges, to clerks who work in the judge's office, to the entire criminal justice system, the appellate courts, the United States Supreme Court. All of this needs diversification, okay? But the problem is, it's really those biases and microaggressions that get us to the point of never fixing what's wrong in our criminal justice system. And that doesn't matter whether you're Black or white, because in my experience, I've met African-American prosecutors who brought the same bias to the table as a white prosecutor. I've had Black judges who brought the same bias. In fact, if you look at some of the studies that were done after the crime bill, when Bill Clinton was president, and he instituted that legislation that actually was the beginning of mass incarceration of African Americans, everybody bought into that. From the prosecutors, Black and white, to the judges, Black and white, bought into thinking that this crime bill was going to solve all our problems because it was going to lock up all the bad people. And it didn't.
Sorry, go ahead, Leroy. I don't want to cut you off.
And when you said that, I couldn't think about nobody but Clarence Thompson. But anyway, if we had more people, I hate to say that, but anyway, like Thurgood Marshall, but we got to, think about other people when we make big decisions like that and how it's going to affect their lives. And I can remember back when Black people fought so hard to keep him from getting in there because of the consequences of his action. Of course, obvious, but anyway, but Oklahoma, the reason why they couldn't incarcerate so many people is because they just want to look like they hard on crime. Oklahoma is kind of ignorant, like she said, when it comes to just moving forward instead of trying to just, stay back in the Western days or just keep things like it was back in the 60s, I guess you might say. That's what this way Oklahoma mentality is. They don't want to advance. They just want to feel like they're important because they are hard and they ain't gonna take no stuff off nobody. And then it affects black folks or people in color people. I mean, well, color people expect the people of color because we get caught up in the system that is just ignorant, just blind to society and just growing with the rest of the world instead of just wanting to be and make themselves. I mean, Oklahoma just when it comes to justice and just being up to date, we just behind time. And that's why we are incarcerated where we is, because that's why they're killing people on death row, doing things just for attention, bad attention, negative attention, and thinking this, you know, that's what the world needs. This is not what the world needs. The world needs people to be more innovative and creative and looking for ways that everybody can be on board, helping it to be a better world. And Oklahoma just ain't with it.
Leroy, I get it. Oklahomans have a hard time with change. I've seen it in my time at the state legislature and the governor's office, my career as an attorney. It's a different state. I have a hard time with change. I agree.
I just want to add something really quick. I think I want to go back to something I said before, the difference between ignorance and willful ignorance. There's nothing wrong with being ignorant. Everybody's ignorant sometimes. Everybody makes mistakes. Not everybody is perfect. We are not God. We are not a higher power. If that is what you believe, we are not capable of knowing everything. But when there comes a point in which you no longer have an excuse. There is no reason in 2022 in this upcoming legislative session that while we already have precedents being set by other states, that we are literally having to defend the fact that the death penalty should not be a thing. We are literally having to introduce that and go back and defend that. There are so many, and I encourage everyone to look at the House Joint Resolution that Representative Marie Turner just passed in the state of Oklahoma about this. But truly, there is no excuse. There is no excuse.
So speaking of like progress and innovation, for Ms. Edwards, what are some policy prescriptions to address this issue, to bring healing to these communities? And do you have any ideas about this that would be considered ahead of our time for this state?
Well, I think as everybody has kind of stated, I mean, this is a multifaceted issue, right? I mean, we have to look at it from healthcare, child welfare, education, key, prison, all of it. I mean, it's an all-encompassing issue, and additionally, homelessness. All of those things come into play with all of it. I mean, I have to say, our 501c4 has a list of bills that we are actively pushing. One of them is Senate Bill 1646, authored by Senator Rader, and that addresses sentencing reform. It classifies different felony offenses, and then provides caps on fines and fees, and provides for fair, I would say, appropriate sentencing ranges. We have House Bill 3848 that we're in support of by Representative Blanchett and Phillips. That's pretrial data collection. That will help us get informed data that we can make or use for policy decisions. That's something, as Professor Radford stated. I mean, we don't have this data. I mean, district attorney's offices, how they make their charging decisions, how they make their, you know, and bail recommendations, and all of this information. We don't have it. And there are different counties that collect it, and we can put it into a system. We have the technology. I mean, technology is there. Why we need to get in the, you know, in our century on technology and making this information available. We have House Bill 3412. That's possession with intent to distribute reform, right? Right now under Oklahoma law, there aren't set amounts and there aren't set criteria to determine when you can charge someone with simple possession or you can charge someone with possession with intent to distribute. And Professor Galoob, I think you have the stats on this, but after State Question 780 was passed, we saw a fairly significant increase in charges for possession with intent to distribute, because it's under the circumstances. If someone has two joints in their pocket and they're with a friend, you know, potentially there's enough there under Oklahoma law to charge instead of simple possession with intent to distribute, because it's not selling. It's if you give it to a friend, you know, that sort of thing. So that Representative Pay is authoring that that legislation. And then House Bill 4369, that is Representative Hill, earned discharge credits. We have people who have been out for a long time and they're not able to put good time and time that they have, you know, done what's right and abided by the numerous things that they have to do in order to be out. But this allows it to apply them to their sentences on probation. And, you know, clearly, last but not least, we have an expungement reform. There, I think the figure was 80% of individuals who actually qualify for expungements don't get expungements because, one, they don't know how, two, they can't afford an attorney, and those fees can be significant. I think the average is $3,000 to $5,000 in order to get an expungement. So this expungement reform bill would help with automatic expungement if you qualify, and you don't have to go through that entire process. And that helps with housing, that helps with securing jobs, education, all of it. All of those are barriers. People coming out of the system with felonies, all of those are barriers. And additionally, Senator Thompson, Senate Bill 1458, eliminating fines and certain fines and fees. I mean, as Professor Radford said, I mean, we are funding our systems off the backs of people who can least afford it, you know, and coming out of the system with all of these fines and fees. It's impossible. There's no way. We're just setting people up for failure. It's just not possible. So that bill, you know, we've got to support all of that. Another bill that's similar to that is Senate Bill 1532, and that's Senator Daniels. And okay, very last, and I will be done. I'm sorry. Thank you for indulging me. But Representative Humphrey has House Bill 3297, which has 781 funding. So we passed State Question 780 in 2016, but it's never been properly funded. There have been savings appropriations to Department of Mental Health and Substance Abuse Services, never under the title of 781 funding, because that was not popular with legislators. You know, our legislature is not fond of ballot initiatives, right? But there have been savings, and we need to fund and get them to the counties to fund the diversion programs and the treatment programs properly. So again, House Bill 3297, Representative Humphrey is another one to watch. Thank you.
Well,
Thank
if I might, I mean, I know we're running late on time, and I wanted to say something that perhaps others on this call or on this seminar might not be in a position to say, which is it is difficult to overstate how much of the statewide problems with incarceration that we have stem from one county, which is Oklahoma County. The outcomes in Oklahoma County are significantly worse than the outcomes of other racially diverse counties in our state, including Tulsa County. Tulsa County does a lot of stuff that I object to too, but if we could get the outcomes in Oklahoma County to be like what they are in Tulsa County, we would be much better off as a state. That is, and part of what Professor Radford and Ms. Edwards are saying, I think is true. You have to pay attention to local district attorney races and see what people are doing. The district attorney doesn't actually try a lot of cases, and to the extent that most district attorneys set policy for how their offices work, it's pretty limited. But district attorneys have have really important decisions to make about the ethos of the offices that they run and the people that they hire. And this is a kind of policy change that's going to take a long time, but it is really the only way that, given all the discretion that we give to prosecutors as part of our criminal legal system, that we can really start addressing racial disparities at the sentencing level, is by changing who's making the charging decisions that we make.
Thank you
Exactly.
so much. That is 100%. And with Oklahoma County, the district attorney race is in 2022. We've got Jackie Ford, who is pro-diversion and pro-responsible outcomes. And then I'm told, I don't know, I'm hoping, but Vicky Behena,
That's
who
what I heard.
I worked with when I was at Crow and Dunleavy, wonderful person, very much engaged and understanding. Please take a look at these ladies.
So we do have a few minutes left, and we wanted to get to some of the questions asked by the audience during this. So just as quickly as possible, Paulette Black asked, injustice continues beyond time served. The lack of employment for ex-offenders is staggering. When will the government, municipal and state, and businesses take a less punitive approach to felons? Decent jobs might lower recidivism, along with counseling support and relieve financial pressures on families. For Professor Radford.
Well, that was the Obama administration was criticized very strongly for their second chance programs that they instituted all across the United States. But that is exactly what the purpose of that was. And we targeted corporations and companies to ask them to hire individuals who've been convicted of felonies. You have that is in conjunction with some sentencing guidelines as well. For example, you're not going to let someone who's been convicted of a sex crime involving a child go work at a daycare, right? You're not going to allow someone who's been accused of swindling money from a bank go work in a bank. No one's going to necessarily push for that. But there are many jobs that would be well-intentioned, well-suited, and allow an individual to reintegrate into the community successfully. But we've got to change the culture, and it's going to take a while. We've got to change the culture of corporations. There are some corporations who are very good at hiring individuals who've been convicted of felonies. And some of them, there's some out there who actually do it, but they don't want it publicized that they do it because they think it'll impact their profits, that people will in fact, stop buying their goods and services. And that's probably true in Oklahoma at this point, because we have such a mentality of being hard on crime. In Oklahoma County, I will say this, that mentality of being hard on crime is just rampant. And I think it started with, from what I've been able to do in historical research, it kind of started with a former district attorney who kept track of the people that he sent to the death chamber, okay? And that that kind of mentality has got to stop before the competition in these offices for convictions in certain areas needs to stop, because crime is not entertainment. Okay. And so we've got a whole lot of work to do before we can shift the culture and shift individuals being able to be successfully reintegrated into the community, and get the job as part of that, the biggest part of that.
Thank you so much. So we have one other one for Ms. Edwards. Jerome McMillan asks, are there active measures being pushed to enact second look laws within the legislative branch? I heard of one senator pushing for this type of legislation last year, but have there been any grassroots organizations campaigning for such change?
I don't know of any legislation that is championing second look laws, but I think that there has been, as you say, grassroots efforts to get those in possibly district attorney offices. I would have to ask Professor Gloob or Professor Radford if you guys heard of anything like that going on actively.
I haven't, no. I mean, but I think it's, yeah, I haven't heard anything along those lines.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. And I think, I mean, I think that there's great potential for that can be pushed through possibly without legislation with grassroots efforts.
Right. I mean, one of the things that some prosecutors' offices have done across the country is engage in conviction integrity units, which is, efforts to go back and make sure that people who were convicted under circumstances that might have been suspect were actually guilty, or there was actually good evidence to believe that they're guilty of the crime that they're convicted of. I think in fewer offices, but I think this is actually maybe the more urgent policy is what are called sentencing integrity units, where you go back and look at, okay, maybe this person did the crime that they were accused of, but is this a fair sentence? And prosecutors' offices can bring motions to reconsider sentences or to discharge sentences if they want to, if they deem it. We're not in that universe or really anywhere near it. There's no prosecutor's office in this state, maybe one, that would even consider something like that. And I think if any office did it, they wouldn't get to sit at the lunch table with the rest of the prosecutors. And it's really difficult to understate how
that's true.
that is.
Or the judges either, Dr. Gaylord.
Yeah,
the problem is in making that kind of change in the criminal justice system, you have to tell a judge that he made the wrong decision.
Yeah, maybe their predecessor, but yeah, right. Understood.
Right.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we are at time. Thank you so much for everyone. Thank you to our panel and everyone that engaged in discussion with us in the chat and tuning in on Facebook Live. We hope you enjoyed the conversation. We hope you learned from it and that you'll take what you've heard here and you will share it with others, spread the word, educate others. If you want to learn more about our policies, Oklahomans for Criminal Justice Reform, our policies, you can go to our website at okjusticereform.org. You can check out our Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook page. And after that, we hope you will continue to engage and make smart decisions at the ballot box and support reforms that are equitable and that are good for our entire community. So thank you so much, and everyone have a good night.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Avita.
Good night, everyone.
Okay, thank y'all.
Good night.
Ooh.